All right, Michael Van Runkle here for HotCars.com. Today I'm really stoked because today we're actually going to get to use the lift. It was over 3 weeks ago. They came, they installed the lift, they got it all level, and they realized on one side where they needed shims, they had forgotten them. And then they got the tall boy lift here installed, and they realized they brought the wrong size cable. So they came back, they reinstalled that, and it's all working perfectly now. And today, I'm gonna get the Montero up, I'm gonna check out its springs, maybe replace some other suspension components, but for now, let's get this thing up. So once you get it up, you can see the first thing I want to do right now is replace these springs. They're pretty loose in there. That's to be expected. I believe these are the original springs that came on the truck, and they actually don't really do a good job anymore. They're pretty old. In town, just going over speed bumps, the back end will bottom out pretty hard. That might be partially because I've got a big spare tire on the back and the bedding platform on the interior. But I think with just some Old Man Emu springs, nothing too crazy. I want to go about a ½ inch higher than stock, slightly thicker, just a little beefier to keep it a little smoother at the tail as I'm driving around. And once I actually take this thing off-roading, that will probably make a big difference. I think it's going to be important to maybe take these sway bar end links off, and they're looking pretty messed up as it is anyways. So I think I'm going to replace those as well while I'm at it, and that should give me a little more play here to get the springs off. Yeah, this one's pretty bad too. You can see it's dirty, but you can see that those bushings are not doing too hot. So I think I'm going to take the truck back down and then loosen up those sway bar end links, take the wheels off, and raise it back up. There we go, sway bar is disconnected. You can already hear it squeaking, which should probably be expected. It's probably on its original sway bar bushings. I'm probably going to replace those too once I've got this thing back up on the lift. With the sway bar disconnected, you can see that this one hangs a little lower on this side, probably because of the Pinard bar would be my guess. But I'm hoping that that amount of play is what will help me get the springs out, and more importantly, help me get the thicker springs back in. Let's see if I can get this spring out, no problem. Well, that was pretty easy. No problem at all. Might as well take the sway bar off while the springs aren't on there and replace those bushings, because once the springs are in the way, there's going to be a little bit less space. Move the camera in a little closer so you can see what's happening. So you can see this thing sort of hinges up like this. You can just pop the sway bar out like that. Sway bar bushing, that is, and the sway bar. And you should hopefully be able to just sort of slide this guy off and replace it. So, excellent guess. First try. Here's the old bushing. You can see it's already cracking in there. The new one is a lot more pliable. Feels a lot softer. This guy, I can almost, yeah, I just tore it apart with my hand. So, I think that's gotta go. Sliding the new one on, but first, just at least give this a little bit of a cleaning. I mean, if this was a Porsche, for example, want to do some grease on here, lithium grease, but I'm not really concerned about it given that this is a Mitsubishi Montero that's quite old. Slide the bushing in, put a little bracket down in there, go do the other side, pop it out. This one's pretty messed up too, possibly even worse. Tear it up with my fingers. Get a little clean. One on there. Bracket. Gotta rotate the sway bar down to get it on there. And then just sort of wiggle it into place. Just hand tight. Then we're going to check our handy Mitsubishi Montero service manual to find out what torque specs we're supposed to tighten these guys to. Had the page pulled up here, I hope. Bingo. So we're at 11 foot-pounds for the end link itself, and 25 foot-pounds for the bracket to the crossmember. Set it to 25 foot-pounds. It's not too much. There we go. And then go do the other side. Now we're going to move on to the springs. Here we got the Old Man Emu springs, ARB. They're definitely a lot more hardcore than what's coming out of the Montero. But they're actually fairly similar size. They tore up the box they were in because they're heavy. Push down on these guys, they compress a little. These guys compress a lot less. They're about the same. But you can see this one's got an additional coil on each spring. And they look like they're a little thicker. They feel like they're a little thicker. So it's supposed to be only a 1/2 inch lift with these springs, the 2910 for the Montero. But we'll see how it actually ends up once they're on the truck, if I can get them on there without having to work too hard. No problem. Well, that one was a bit of a tighter fix just because of the exhaust, but let's take a closer look here. So I think because these guys won't quite stay put in there, what I'm going to have to do is lower it down enough, jack it up a little bit, and reconnect the sway bar end links so that these will have less room to flop around, and then I'll be able to lower it down onto the wheels. So this is going to take some finesse, being very careful as I do it. Alright, well, first things first, got to figure out how to get these sway bar end links going, I think. And they came in the box, totally unassembled. Well, I think that's how it'll go. Only one way to find out. Working in the wind. Well, I'd say it's looking pretty good. We're in the perch, sort of on this side. If you look up in there. It's up on the perch there. And on this side, we're pretty well set in the perch. Well set up top as well. The question is, will I be able to reconnect the sway bar end links like this? Or am I going to have to do this all again? Alright, so we got the sway bar end links installed. They're not torqued down, but they're at least keeping this tight. The question is, if I drop the axle with the floor jack now, is the spring going to stay in place, or is the sway bar going to let it fall enough that I'm going to have to think about a new strategy? Let's check it out. Looks just doable. Yeah, it's looking like it's gonna sit there. All right, time to put the wheels back on. So what I'm hoping for now is that as I torque down the sway bar end links, that will keep this from happening every time I lift up the rear of the Montero. Otherwise, it's going to be a real serious hassle when I need to do anything on this truck. The torque on these guys is only 11 foot-pounds. I don't even have a torque wrench that goes that low, so we're just going to be doing this by hand. There we go. Hopefully that's the job, but we'll have to see. There are a couple things I want to do to test it. The first is to measure how high we're at now with the new springs. Right at the center of the wheel here. We're about 1.25 inches higher on this side. And about 1.25 inches higher on this side. It was supposed to be 1/2 inch. Probably something to be said for the fact that the old springs were worn out and saggy, and the new ones are brand new. Maybe they'll settle a little bit. I'm not really sure how long that could take. What I really want to do now is lift it up again and see if the springs will actually stay in place. Otherwise, I've got a serious problem every time I put this Montero on the lift. It worked. Well, I'm optimistic that that's a good repair. All that we'll have to see is how it holds up to some driving, which I'm going to go do shortly. One thing that was on my mind next when I bought those rear sway bar end links and sway bar bushings is what needs to be done in terms of suspension components on the front end. I definitely have some rattling, especially over sort of washboardy roads, paved or not, concrete or dirt. And so I was thinking that maybe the front ball joints and control arm bushings were maybe starting to go. The ball joints definitely looked terrible, grease everywhere. I figured they were torn up, especially the upper ball joints. So I want to get under there and check those out. But first I got to take this thing for a spin and make sure it doesn't explode at the back end, because I want to get that job wrapped up before I start in on the front. If I hear any bad noises, I'll probably stop immediately and figure out what to do then. Here's a little bump. No bad noises so far. Well, the verdict is it feels a lot firmer back there. Now it's time to take a look at the front end, see what's going wrong, because now that the back end feels better, the front feels even looser and more wobbly, especially going over the little bumps.